A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Luke, Han, and the Princess's story didn't end with the destruction of the Death Star. It continues in The Empire Strikes Back. The next chapter in the Star Wars saga. An epic of alien worlds. And the climactic clash between good and evil. Join the further adventures of Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, Lando Calrissian, C-3PO, R2-D2, and Chewbacca in a spectacular new episode of the continuing Star Wars saga, The Empire Strikes Back. Coming to your galaxy this summer.
Everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and joining me I have James here. Say hi, James.
Hello, hello.
Today we are following up on a series, I guess you could call it a multi-part episode that we started a while back about the Marvel adaptation of the Star Wars films. We did New Hope a couple of episodes ago. Today we are going to be hitting The Empire Strikes Back. Now, as we mentioned last time, there are differences in the original ones and in the modern ones. And with Empire, for example, we are still dealing with different variations, not as drastic as Star Wars in terms of, oh my God, the colors are so off and this and that, and there's multiple versions. No. As far as I know right now, there's only one version of Empire that's out there. Whether it's a Dark Horse or a Marvel, it's basically the same thing. There's only one major change that we will talk about when we get to it, having to do with Yoda. The comic itself started off as a 6-issue release, similar to Star Wars, but it was a little different the way that it was brought out there. James, what do you remember from that?
Star Wars comics had already been established as a monthly run for several years. So instead of having a special miniseries of The Empire Strikes Back or a separate miniseries, it was included in the run, starting with issue number 39 and going to issue 44.
So it's just continued.
Yeah, so the cover of the magazine is Star Wars, but the subheading is, and some of the artwork it says The Empire Strikes Back, and that, on the cover. So we know we're into the Empire Strikes Back era. Things are changing. So everything up into that was still the stuff like we talked about, the type of storylines and post-Yavin and everything like that. They seem to have known where they were going as they were building to Empire, but for this run, as soon as that storyline hits, everything changes, but it's all in the same.
And we're in Empire Land.
Everything changed afterward. No more, well, later on there's some talking rabbits, but no more talking rabbits.
Yeah, no kidding. Let me first give you guys a little background, a little credits, if you will, like I did the last time, so we know exactly who we're dealing with in terms of who's actually coloring this thing, who's drawing it, who's writing it, and all that stuff.
And as much as we like the other guys and Chaikin and everybody from the early Star Wars run, I have to say these guys were some of my favorite work in the comics. It's like everybody has a favorite era of a certain comic book strip, but these guys for Star Wars, I think, really started to, make the characters look like they're supposed to, make the world start to look like. So go ahead, tell me who they are.
Now, as I mentioned before, there are two versions of this, and there are two sets of people associated with these two versions, but it is not as drastic as, like we said, with Star Wars, because Star Wars, you've got to keep in mind, nobody had anything. They had very little materials. Here, they didn't have all the materials they needed for this specific movie, but at least they had the foundation of Star Wars.
And it looks like more access.
Right, and you kind of knew what characters looked like already from the previous film. You know what Luke looks like. You don't have to be super creative about it. And even in the style, by the time we get to Empire, the drawings are a little more cinematic and realistic looking.
And they didn't have, as we said with Star Wars, it's almost like the artists and the writers and Marvel Comics, they had to be convinced to even get on board. Where this is established, everybody knew this was a home run, no matter what happened with the movie in terms of money making.
Right.
Story-wise, it was still going to be a home run.
Yeah, this time around, Stan Lee did not have to be, beaten up to get him to do this thing. And then it's funny because, from what I understand, he was dead set against it. But then when he saw the money flowing in, it was like he put his name on the cover and he wrote an introduction and read the one-page introduction of how much he loves Star Wars. Like, you throw a couple of dollars at somebody and all of a sudden they get very happy. Yeah. Anyway, let me give you some names. The writer/editor for the first version, which is the Marvel version, is Archie Goodwin. And in the second version, he's credited as script. Again, same guy, Archie Goodwin, which is a name that will continue for the future ones.
Yeah.
The artists credited for both the first and second versions are Al Williamson and Carlos Garzón, both of them credited as artists and then credited as pencils and inks. Same deal. It's the same job.
I like that combination of Al Williamson and Archie Goodwin.
And these guys, like I said, if you are a fan of the comics, you will see these names pop up in the future. Letters, I guess it's the lettering. It's also considered lettering. Rick Veitch and Jim Novak.
They had good penmanship.
They brought him back for the second version. Rick did come back. And finally, the colorist. We have two sets of colorists here. Carl Gafford was the first Marvel colorist, and then with the second version of it, you had James Sinclair and Frank Lopez. Again, there is a little bit of color differences, but not as crazy drastic as we saw with Star Wars. All right, let's do this like we did last time. We're going to tell you guys the major differences and the esoteric differences. And, if we have any substantial information we can add to them, we'll do that for you.
I'd like to just, before you go ahead, mention the presentation that the Empire Strikes Back, since it had secrets and they could not let them out, the comic came out in a monthly situation, but there was a presentation of a paperback in the novel form, but basically a novel-sized graphic novel.
Yes.
And that had everything in it, all the chapters, and it was released when the movie came out in May 1980. So my estimation is they broke that into 6 parts, starting probably in May or June of 1980, and went forward that way. And it's actually really nice to have that. It seems special to have a novel-sized comic book, and you have it. I have it, and I had it from when it first came out because, again, with Star Wars at that point, we were sponges. We just absorbed everything.
Right. With Star Wars, from what I understand, and I actually just picked it up recently, they created a novel-size comic, but it was in black and white. And I guess it's an artsy thing. It's something we mentioned in the past that Chaykin wanted to do it in black and white, and he was talked out of it. So I guess it was a way of releasing something different to milk it for a couple more dollars, and it's slightly different.
And I think they were doing that to try to get their product into different hands. General non-comic book fans who are Star Wars fans might not go and look for comic books. But if you went to a supermarket and you saw the paperback rack or a bookstore and they presented
it's a novel.
The Star Wars novel, I think somebody just said, hey, look, we can get this into different places. And it was released in 1977.
And
so
that's
November 1977. So
that's the one I told you that has introduction by Stan Lee, which is like, oh, now he likes Star Wars.
Yeah. Right on the cover. And my guess is the people were just clamoring for anything Star Wars. So Marvel said, hey, look, we can throw this out there. It doesn't cost very much to print the new cover.
But with Empire, this is a nice fat size, color, pretty,
Yeah, front and back, it's beautiful artwork. And I do recall I remember when I got it new, and I was just so excited because...
And again, I'm not sure exactly...
I used to display it.
No, it's beautiful, and I'm not exactly sure what it was that they made this major change to the Yoda character, which we will talk about soon when we get to that Yoda scenes. Off the bat, like I said before, there is a difference in colors. It's not drastic, but there is a difference in colors between one and the other. The crawl, the traditional Star Wars crawl, it's completely different. It's the same information, it's just completely arranged in different matter. Right.
As we know from previous experience, like that was probably being worked on and reread by everybody saying, hey, let's change this, change that, with still getting the same point across.
And similar to Star Wars, again, even though the creators of this already had the foundation built, they knew what they were dealing with, the specific special effects at the time were not complete as usual. Effects and music are the last thing they do. Nobody cares about music on a comic book, but the effects, when you design a ship, when you create an explosion, whatever it is, these guys couldn't see it. So they're interpreting
and
the
we
script.
knew some of these effects were being done last minute because they were so elaborate and they were adding, compared to Star Wars, so many more layers and levels of effects that even George was annoyed that it was taking so long and costing so much money. So the Marvel artists had to finish with their own interpretation.
Usually at this point, maybe they have, obviously they have stills because they always have stills because they shoot stills. They might have some dailies. And they might have some models or pictures of models, but you don't get to see these models. Like, you don't see an AT-AT in action. You don't see certain ships flying in action.
They
can guess how they would
must
move.
Walk this way, but
which is what they did with the first one, but in a bigger manner.
Yeah.
The interiors, when you see interiors, those seem to match very well because, again, it's stuff that was shot and at least they have pictures. Yeah. So it's very cinematic how it matches what the sets look like. One of the main differences, that fight that Han Solo has with Leia, they're bickering in the hallway in Hoth, is something that is expanded here, and you get to listen to the dialogue, and it's something that we've seen later with the Blu-ray release, the deleted scenes, the famous deleted scenes. That leads in the comic to the Wampa crashing through one of the ice walls, kind of digging holes. Again, we've never saw that in the movie until the Blu-ray deleted scenes. We see the droid medical examiner. He's taking apart a Tauntaun that was attacked, and they're trying to figure out what happened to this Tauntaun.
Autopsy.
Right, exactly. I remember seeing pictures of that, and I think even the Topps cards might have had a picture, and I'm like, what was that scene from? I don't remember that. Blu-rays. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see these scenes, they're all in the Blu-rays.
But this is almost like, the comic book was almost like a special edition of Empire before special editions were cool.
It's an unexpected, unplanned special edition, if you will.
Yeah, because clearly, when we get to it, you'll see they had access to the majority of the script because there were key secret scenes that are included in the comic. It's not like they were kept out. They just didn't have the nuanced portion of the script where they improvised on set actually as the scene was being shot. So they're reading a script rather than dailies or the revised printout.
They hopefully have the last version of the script when they put this thing together. We don't get to see in the comic form Han opening up the Tauntaun's belly and all the guts spilling out, probably because of the violence factor maybe.
Yeah.
Might be a little too gory for kids. We do see in the comic the Wampa, once again, crashing through a wall near R2. Like, chunks of the ice walls are falling on top of R2's head.
All this Wampa stuff was fine, but I think the charm of Empire is that they edited it right, and they didn't need. You got an idea that the Wampa.
They were able to minimize it quite a lot, but
the Wampa was a bad cat.
But it was supposed to be a more prominent B plot, if you will, or C plot.
Yeah, and it didn't really get anywhere except the fact that there's this nuisance.
Right. They have a scene where you actually see rebel soldiers firing on a Wampa that's attacking and hurting them. Again, we do see this on the Blu-ray material. You guys want to see it? It's there for to be seen. We have a conversation by some of the base commanders saying that they're adjusting their sensors, to be able to detect these Wampas nearby, because apparently, I guess in the story, the Wampas are almost like polar bears, or big giant grizzly bears that are running rampant somehow for some reason, and they're causing mayhem and destroying things and hurting people. So they're trying to kind of wrangle them into some location to be able to manage them. We also see on the comic book that at a certain point, the probe droid that lands around there destroys a rebel outpost.
Yeah.
So there's a little more interaction with this probe droid than what we saw in the movie. One other difference that I noticed in some of the big kind of wide-angle shots of the entire Rebel base from the outside, some of the buildings and some of the ships that are shown, they're more McQuarrie-like looking. They're very artsy, very fancy-looking buildings that they didn't end up that way.
And I don't think they had those shots done because, again, that's all special effects.
Yeah, that could have been also concept art from McQuarrie for all you know. The guy said, okay, let's try putting that there.
Like this.
Right, and I've seen some of those paintings, and it's like, oh, wow, that's nice, but they never used it.
Yeah.
There's a scene where R2 and C-3PO in the comic pass by a room full of captured Wampas. We mentioned this before. They're hurting them and throwing them in a room to kind of keep them from hurting people.
It's like an Alien, the Alien 4. They kind of figured, let them in there, and then maybe they'll kill each other.
After Luke is hurt and is treated in the Bacta tank, he's brought out, and they attach a Bacta mask on him to it's kind of like plastic surgery, I guess, to get his face back into place. I remember in the comic book it's there. deleted scenes. You can find it there. They actually have a mechanical arm putting the mask and taking it off. There's a little more chatter that's deleted between Luke and Leia as he's recovering, like a slightly
it's almost
flirting,
like an alternate take.
But it's kind of like, what are you going to do? Well, Han's got to leave, and I can't believe he's leaving. And, more of that whining of Han's about to leave type of stuff. Blu-rays, if you want it. A lot of the space shots I also noticed, and I think this also happened in Star Wars, they used a lot of creative license in showing space. I mean, we're used to in a movie, in Star Wars at least, you mainly see star fields. But here they put these huge, giant planets and suns everywhere.
They're filling the panel.
Right, they're making it more colorful, which is all right, no big deal. Another exterior shot of Hoth also shows, like I said before with McQuarrie stuff, they show transport vehicles that are not in any shape or form Lucasfilm related. These are like Flash Gordon, super fat with jets. And it's like, wow, they're really taking an artist rendition of these things. And, we never saw those. The ion cannon, once it shoots at the Star Destroyer, which in the comic, it almost looks like they're blowing up the Star Destroyer to pieces, when in the movie, it almost seems to act like an EMP pulse that kind of turns off some of the powers and stuff like that. It doesn't create so much damage, but I guess for the comic, it makes sense to make it bigger than it really is. There's a shot when we first see the AT-ATs of a patrol Tauntaun rebel soldier being practically chased by an AT-AT, and it's like, no, I don't remember that. It's pretty, but I don't remember that.
The AT-AT is galloping.
Yeah, and again, you could say to yourself, well, remember, there's a McQuarrie painting of a Tauntaun being chased by an AT-AT. So the guys might have said, well, there you go. There's a chance. There it is. The cockpit in the AT-AT is in the wrong place. We know from the toys and from the movie, there's a certain spot where the cockpit, which they color it red, like a red stripe, that's where it is. But for some reason, on the first version of the comic book, they placed it, I think, either too high or too low. But by the time they get to the second version, the second wave, they actually put it in the proper place. The way the AT-AT moves, or the way that I see it moving on the comic book, it does not move properly. And again, if all they have to go on is a model picture or the actual model, and they're told, well, it kind of moves like an elephant. Okay, so they do what they can, but again, they didn't get it exactly right. We don't see the AT-STs, which I don't remember if it was a last-minute addition.
Were they in McQuarrie art? I think it was something some model makers probably said, hey, look at this cool stuff, and let's work it in. Because they're not even the same style as the ones that turn up in Jedi. They're more rounded.
I could have swore I read a story about one of these chief model makers, a Tippett or a Murin, somebody like that, or a Ralston, saying, hey, look, I've been playing around with this model. Yeah. Let's throw it in here. So it might have been an afterthought. So that would explain why it was not that. But it's I love that little chick. It's the chicken walker. Mm-hmm. The actual rebels being destroyed by the AT-AT is much more violent in a way. And I know in some ways they try to lower the violence, but here it's more rugged and more like they're getting blown to bits. It's like, wow, really?
Disemboweled.
The way that the AT-AT trips on the harpoon cable and falls, it seems to fall like, I couldn't even explain it. Like one leg goes one way, another leg goes up and down.
Like it's on an ice, like it's on roller skates.
Right. Everything goes everywhere. But in the movie, it kind of tips, boom. And it's more dynamic the way it falls here. Whatever. What are you going to do? This is something I complained before during Star Wars, when Luke hangs over in the Death Star, that he has to use the cable that's attached to his belt. Here, when Luke climbs into the AT-AT, he is just hanging by a rope by his hand, like Super Action Man.
No way.
There's no attachment to the belt, which I know I'm being super ridiculously picky
here. Just pointing it out.
But, it's one of these things that is different. It's interesting, but it's different too. The exploding AT-AT, again, doesn't match the movements of the movie. They explode like they're in a million gazillion pieces. It's different. The Star Destroyers crash into each other as they are avoiding the Falcon, and in the comic, it seems almost like they're exploding in the way that they're crashing. But in the movie, if you remember, they kind of slide, they grind against each other, and there's not much destruction. It's more of an annoyance. The TIE bombers show up very early in the pursuit of the Falcon,
but they do
in
look
the
good.
Comic. They look nice. You're not going to get an argument out of me. The asteroid field in the comics is also much, much thicker and bigger than on the movie.
You really couldn't get a ship through that in the way they present it.
Oh, it's like an ocean of rocks. It's ridiculous. In Vader's meditation chamber, I get the feel by looking at the picture, when you see Vader from reverse like a silhouette, that he might actually have hair on the back of his head. Again, I don't know if they saw the picture of the scarred head with almost no hair. I don't think there was any hair at all.
They're not really showing anything. It's more in silhouette, but you do look like there's there's extra wisps of something, so they tried to, I guess, give him a little bit of hair.
They also suggest that as Vader is getting ready to get up from the meditation chamber, his cape is lowered through like wires or something is attached to him. It's part of the procedure of getting dressed, I guess, for him in there. In Dagobah, as a whole, it's much more exotic looking, and it's much more colorful and much more animal. To me, it's much more Disney-ish. It has the little squirrely little guys and little lizards everywhere, like this paradise, and not as depressingly dark and gloomy as it looks in the movie. Now, here's the biggest difference that we talked about earlier. In the earlier version of Empire's comic, Yoda is depicted as one of the early McQuarrie, I believe, concept
And he looks
drawings.
more elfish or gnomish.
Very thin, skinny, raisinish.
The Wicked Witch face.
Yeah, he looks very different. Almost purplish at some points. This is something that was changed later when they finalized the actual puppet to be a more plumpy green Yoda-looking thing.
Well, as we've been discussing this, I've been thinking the Dagobah scenes were among the last to be shot on set in England. We know this. Mm-hmm. The rap party was held on the Dagobah set with covered over the water.
In the mud.
So I think they already had to have this done with the concepts. So that's why Dagobah looks different, because they didn't really get to see the sets, and there wasn't even any production stills of the sets yet by the time they had to be doing their artwork and getting this ready to be ready for May. So that's probably why we saw so many changes from the change of the character. When they saw that it's now a Muppet.
That they had to fix.
The Muppet Yoda. Yeah. It's just totally a different character.
It looks so different.
And at least, but to their credit, they at least made updates for future printings.
No, yeah, they did. And that's how future printings went on. They stayed with the proper one.
Yeah.
When Luke first meets Yoda in the movie, he kind of points his gun at him. In the comic, he ignites his lightsaber at him. Okay, that's different. When Yoda steals Luke's flashlight in the comic, he then uses it to kind of lead him to his house, and they're all following him, and Yoda's like kind of pointing the way with the flashlight. Again, it's a little different, no big deal. When they are trying to flush out the Falcon from the asteroid field, in the movie, it's being done by the TIE bombers. That was the whole point of having a TIE bomber. Here in the comic, they're using the actual Star Destroyers.
Are blasting through.
So it's like, oh, that's a wasted gag. You know, that's the whole point of the TIE bombers. But, what are you going to do? The interior of the cave is more colorful and organic. The cave that, I guess, the Falcon is hiding inside, the slug creature. We also see a lot of Star Destroyers getting destroyed, actually being blown up by asteroids, because Vader insists on contacting the Emperor, and he has to, get in there. So, again, that's not accurate. We don't see the Emperor's face when he's communicating. In the movie, we actually do see, I know it's a different person portraying the Emperor as later on, but actually you do see the person's face. Here they kind of stay away from it. Maybe it was an effect that wasn't ready yet.
Yeah.
But you knew that they were doing it. We don't see the Minox. We don't see what the Minox look like here. And we also don't see the full slug creature. We do see the teeth closing in and the Falcon escaping, but you don't get that slug coming out of the
It's
asteroid.
almost like they wanted to keep that a secret.
But we don't know that. We don't know if is a secret or not enough material.
That's what I mean. But you get the vibe. Oh, maybe they wanted. But if you're letting them know Vader's Luke's father, then everything else is fair game.
That's the big secret of the whole movie.
Yeah, and that made it into the comic. So
we do get to see Luke practicing, his Jedi routines with those metal bars that Yoda throws up in the air, which we got to see the final version of that and the Blu-rays, deleted scenes. And there's a lot of training montages that the comic book uses, I guess, to kind of speed up time, where you see like these sentry balls being thrown around and Luke elevating different rocks in different places, and the shirtless Luke that they never made a figure out of
a little
the shirtless
something
Luke.
for the ladies. Or some gentlemen.
During the point where the X-Wing starts to sink, according to the comic, the cockpit is open, and I believe Yoda is able to bring it out either before the water goes into the cockpit or after. Or if it's after, then I don't know how you could. That cockpit must be destroyed.
So are these excuses why people are saying how come they?
I don't know. I mean, what are you going to do?
Everything inside is waterproof.
When Vader meets with the bounty hunters, he wants proof of disintegration. In the movie,
doesn't want any disintegration.
There will be no disintegration, especially from you, buddy.
Yeah.
In Bespin, we do see that there's a lot of non-human creatures living there as citizens. And I know that's a fact from the concept material. There was originally supposed to be a lot of different races and creatures there. When Luke fights the Vader image in the magic tree or the tree of horrors or whatever you want to call it. No, that's the Simpsons, the tree of horrors. he doesn't actually decapitate Vader. He strikes Vader, and the mask opens, and it's Luke's face, but he never actually takes his head off like he does in the movie. There's a scene where Han and Leia are kind of chatting about what's happening inside Bespin, which we do get it also in the deleted scenes. It's more expositionary, what do you think's going on? I don't know. Do you trust Lando? I trust Lando? I don't trust Lando. That kind of stuff. And I think they might be like kissing or something, more romantic scenes. Vader threatens Lando to place a permanent garrison in Cloud City, and at the time tells him that what he wants to do is to keep Leia and Chewie as permanent prisoners in Cloud City. And that is what Lando seems to be agreeing to, which, as we later find out, the plan keeps changing. Now, I love you, I know. Tell us about that line, James, because it's different. It's not in the comic
initial
book.
script had, I love you. Well, I love you too. Something like that. It was very innocuous, nothing special.
And Harrison Ford.
Yeah, and it was improvised between Harrison and Irvin Kershner.
Right.
To say, hey, you're Han Solo. You're not going to just say, yeah, I love you too, like some, house husband. You're going to be a little bit,
Why are you pointing at me? What's your problem?
You're going to be a little bit, brazen. I love you. Yeah, I know. Of course you do. I'm Han Solo. So that probably wasn't in the script.
Right.
And nobody probably thought, hey, we better let Marvel know we made this adjustment.
Well, they shot it, and I guess at some point they tried it in editing, and it worked. And these guys, obviously, during the comic, had no clue that they were doing this, and they didn't know if it was going to work.
Lucky for us, it's a cool scene, and, it's just sometimes those things don't translate into the other media.
The carbon freezing process in the comic is portrayed as a fiery kind of liquid
lava
that comes cascading down from above that turns you into a rock, thing, which is a little different. In the movie, it's more of a gas that turns into a solid. Now, you mentioned something before about the whole issue of continuity when it comes to carbon freezing.
Oh, yeah. Well, this obviously is something from 1980. And in the Clone Wars cartoon from about a year or two ago, there was an episode they had to go in stealth. They couldn't be any life forms on. It was operated by droids. And Anakin was part of the crew who put themselves, he and Obi-Wan and about three or four others, put themselves into carbon freeze so they would be in hibernation and very low life form readings through this special, security checkpoint. And in my mind, it's just, this little thing. But Vader would have known carbon freeze works because he was part of it as Anakin. But I liked your assessment. You kind of felt that it was, that
I think again, I'm being a Lucas apologist as always. The theory maybe it's that even though he knew it worked, he wanted to put Han Solo through some kind of new pain in order to draw Luke, because that's the whole plan, is to draw Luke there.
Yeah.
So if he puts him in this perilous situation, even though he knows he's not going to die, but it's going to be very uncomfortable, that will kind of get the feelers out to Luke to hurry up, get over here type of vibe.
And it's a good answer, even though it's 20 years apart, 25, 30 years apart, but it's a good answer because Luke had seen a vision. They're dying, I have to go.
It's my retcon.
Yeah, if they're basically just getting, a little laser zap on their cheeks or whatever the torture machine was doing, that's not enough to say, oh my God, I got to go save my friends. Like, they'll get over it. So I think your assessment is actually really good.
Who knows? See, Vader also slightly chokes Lando at the end of this carbon freezing process, which is something that happens in the movie a little later. Lando's kind of grabbing his neck like somebody.
He realizes he's about to be made uncomfortable.
And he, Vader once again tells him that he is going to place a permanent garrison.
I just like to say the word garrison.
And maybe it provides a little more motivation for Lando to then turn on Vader. But it's a little bit repetitive for the comic book to have to go through that garrison thing twice. It's like, okay, I get the message. No big deal. In the comic book, Lando gives Lobot a verbal code word or a verbal code number to activate the rescue plan, if you will.
Lobot is a non-speaking character, so they don't know that maybe that's how he's going to be presented.
In the movie, it's different.
It's a different media, so they have to have some sort of communication so the reader knows that they're
actually... Right, because in the movie, he kind of taps on a
I like
wrist
the movie
device.
Version of Lobot that he's more mysterious because at this point, he doesn't even speak. He's just so in tune to the computer world.
If they did that in the comic, they would have to explain. Now Lando is keying in some numbers to let Lobot know that, I guess it's a better way of explaining what's going on. There's a certain point where Luke is looking for Vader to actually have that final confrontation. In the comic, it's very fast. He's like, boom, 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 he's there. In the movie, it's more dramatic. It's more like he has to go down this this passage and up this hill and up this blah, blah, blah. Obviously, for timing, they have to go faster. There's a point where Vader tries to, again, pour this magical liquid carbon material over Luke. That's not how it happens in the movie. When Vader cuts Luke's hand in the comic, we don't visually see the hand being cut. Again, we're going to speculate it's to minimize the violent aspect of it. As Luke falls into the air vent.
There's a scene that has a little, even if not because of the comic, but it's a little contentious because of its original nature.
Right. The comic tells us that because of the actual air ventilation that's taking place, that's what kind of cushions his fall and lets him, I guess, not get squashed.
First there's suck, and then there's blow.
Well, this goes back to something, we might have mentioned this a while back, but initially the concept was going to be that when Luke lets himself go into the vent, into the hole, the vents are so powerful that push him up in the air, above Vader even, to the point where Vader has to kind of look up to see what the hell is that.
There are stills that prove this.
We've seen them. I have them, the Vader looking up in the air, and I kept, actually, that's my Facebook banner.
Why is he up there? What's he looking at?
It's like, I don't remember Vader ever looking up in the air like he's looking at birds or something. No, this is an abandoned concept. They tried to shoot part of it, and they couldn't get it right, because what was supposed to happen was Luke was supposed to be blown up high and then low, and that back and forth of the air coming on and coming off is what lets him land in an area without destroying him. Well, in the comic, they kind of mentioned that too, that the reason why he didn't get squashed is because he was able to kind of cushion the fall by these air events or whatever you want to call them. But I mean, you had other theories.
Yeah, I feel like at one point, I don't know if I got this from the novelization or if I just interpreted weird, that Vader was saving him in some manner, not necessarily saving him to like keep him safe, but saving him at some point there. Maybe he's still the father and son team, or maybe I still want you to be the Emperor's prize rather than being squashed at the bottom of Bespin. So my impression was that Vader force pushed or guided him into
that particular
shaft, and then he goes down. But then it all fell apart when I started thinking about it, because then he winds up in that little shaft and he slides down the little chute.
And Wile E. Coyote shows up.
And Wile E. Coyote, and he lands and he's like, oh, thank goodness.
Safe. I made
he's
it.
safe. And the hatch opens up below him, and then he falls yet again.
You mean the hatch labeled Acme?
And then he falls yet again, where another door opens and he lands on the weather vane. So had Vader had anything to do with this, instead of crashing at the bottom of Bespin, he'll fall to the bottom of the planet.
He's the worst planner ever, Vader.
Yeah, and thank goodness for the weather vane. I didn't know that weather vane was there.
What I think I heard somewhere that the reason why the bottom opens up and he falls even further down is because that whole thing is supposed to get rid of like impurities or contaminants, and Luke is an impurity and a contaminant to the system.
Yeah.
It's just getting rid of the garbage, basically.
The whole thing, going back real quick to this suck and blow portion of it, on one hand, Luke may have known, had he, not necessarily, he wasn't trying to kill himself, he may have been aware of that whole up and down motion of having been out there, that if he timed it right, jump, get pushed up, and give him time to escape.
Or it's Jedi skills.
On the other hand, that takes away, that makes him more like, you can't end running. I mean, in a way he did run, but, this seems more dramatic and sad, rather than him just running. Our hero's running away from Vader. So besides the special effect not working,
but think about the
people
prequels,
might have realized
the agility of these Jedi on the prequels. You could say, well, maybe Luke is now to the point where he can do these incredible acrobatics, where he can jump somewhere and guide himself as to where to land.
Well, that couple of minutes on Dagobah must have taught him something.
Again, that's also very controversial.
No, we don't have to go down that route.
What we're talking about at this point is how much time actually did Luke spend in Dagobah? I don't remember the novel telling us. Was he there a week, a month, a year? How long was he there?
We're supposed to assume some time has passed because the Falcon doesn't have hyperdrive. So you figure, well, if it normally would have taken 10 minutes, maybe
I
this
didn't see Han Solo shaving or anything. Nobody was freshening up. The Wookiee,
they're all wearing the same clothes.
That Wookiee must really be pretty rank by now.
And so I mean, some people it takes quite a long time for their Jedi training. Luke was a quick learner.
I mean,
but that's another show.
That's another show. We can do a whole show about that.
But back to that other thing, I think it was best the manner in which it happened, even if it does seem a little silly that he kept going down the chutes and ladders and everything, because otherwise he becomes more of a coward running.
I guess. When Luke actually does fall and he's hanging by that weather vane and he's trying to contact Ben, with his mind. In the comic book, Vader actually kind of responds. He's kind of like, I guess, tapping into that signal.
Hello?
Hey, who's this? He's kind of trying to answer back, I guess. There's one little nitpicky thing is that in the comic book, the TIE fighters are already chasing the Falcon. They're firing on it and chasing it. And then the Falcon turns around and comes back to pick up Luke. In the movie, the TIE fighters are not on top of the Falcon until after Luke is picked up. That's why they have to get the hell out of there that fast, because the TIE fighters are coming. And you don't want to have lasers zapping while you're trying to...
when he's on the top hatch.
that wouldn't be too good. In the comic, once again, when Luke actually falls towards the Falcon, it's because the weather vane snaps and he falls uncontrollably.
Just coincidentally, the Falcon got there right
and they
then.
got there on time.
Okay, that's fine.
But in the movie, he basically lets go
Drops
when
himself.
he sees the Falcon underneath him.
I like that better.
Okay, that's nice. When the Falcon goes into hyperspace, we don't see that.
Yeah.
The effect of hyperspace, we don't see it, which is weird because we already had a hyperspace effect on Star Wars. They could use that as reference.
Like, yeah.
They never used it. On the hospital ship, Luke is actually not wearing hospital clothes.
Yeah, that was a weird shot.
Like in the movie.
Yeah, he's looking like he's wearing a leather jacket, a bomber jacket.
Yeah, he's wearing
and
like regular
pants or
clothes.
black pants or something.
We also don't see his new hand, but are told about him getting a new hand. I don't know if that would be too visually disturbing to see that mechanical. I don't know. Who the hell knows? Leia is also dressed like at the end of New Hope. And she even has the buns and everything back, which I guess, again, they never shot that in time for them to see what these people are going to be wearing. The effect shot of the whole fleet departing never made it to the comic because, as we both know, that was the last second edition that
Very
Lucas
good
demanded.
because it's a dramatic ending.
But it was legendarily last minute how they did it. And the final change that I want to mention is that the Falcon at the end of Empire flies into the swirling galaxy.
Yeah, it's a pretty little closing, flyway.
In the comic, again, probably because it was an effect shot, wasn't
They
ready.
just show it in the
shoots
background.
up into space, out to who the hell knows. Now, as we mentioned before, this does not have a new interpretation. They didn't do a secondary Dark Horse version like they did with the special editions, like we mentioned on Star Wars. So, in a way, I'm kind of glad they kind of left it alone because even though the special edition...
cover of the Dark Horse looks similar
It's
to the Empire novelization version.
And granted that the special edition did include a lot of new stuff that obviously will never see the light of day if they never make it. But because Star Wars was the first one and the biggest one and the one with the most changes, I guess that's why they decided it's an anniversary. Let's tie it into the release of the special editions. But they didn't decide, I guess, on Empire. I mean, from my perspective...
Maybe the sales weren't great on Star Wars.
Yeah, who knows? But I mean, I like this kind of stuff. It's easier for me to commit to just the movie adaptations than the entire... multi-year line.
I never really bought any of the Dark Horse comics, so I don't have those versions. But yeah, it's an undertaking being a comic collector and keeping up with stuff at any point in your life, as a kid or an adult.
And nowadays, it's, again, we're in the middle of a huge shift as far as comics having to do with Star Wars, because the property is now going back to Marvel. No big surprise, Disney owns Marvel. It's all in the family again.
I think we've mentioned it before, but for some of our new listeners, they're putting out a compendium of all the Star Wars comics, which this Empire line will be part of, since it was, part of the actual monthly issues.
And we also know that from a recent article that I read that they are, once again, re-releasing the New Hope edition with
many covers.
Not only many covers, but they are recoloring it again. From what I've seen, the art is the same, but they're going for the colors again. So,
I guess every gets a fresh up, but I like the original look of the silly look. And this one didn't have as many problems in terms of changing colors throughout or character faces and things. But, it still has its comic book charm.
Right. It's another way of... Here's the thing. This is kind of like the movie adaptation novel and even the radio drama that we're going to talk about sometime in the future. It's a different way of experiencing the movie from a slightly different angle, not only visually, but sometimes verbally a different angle.
And it gives you a taste of what was going on at the time, because they are probably, the comic book artists and writers are probably more likely to give you alternate or cut scenes because of how early in the process they're working. Right. Where if the finished product has cut stuff or added things, that the comic, the novel, they're going to have added stuff, which is almost like a director's cut in itself.
Yes.
And the radio show has elements of that, which we'll get to. Right. Some good, some, some cases it's because
and depending on the medium, you also get an actual author's interpretation. In other words,
Sometimes it has nothing. The comic book writer or the novelization author has nothing. It's just something he added because he said, hey, this might seem good.
They might add a fact that has nothing to do with the script. Yeah. They might add a visual that has nothing to do with the script. Yes, sometimes, like you said, it does come from a deleted scene. Wonderful, great, I love it. But yeah, they do have a little wiggle room, and I'm sure the person who authorized it has to, whoever's doing this for you can go completely nuts and create new characters out of thin air that are completely out there. But as long as they kind of keep it within the realm of what the story you're telling, it's acceptable. And it's interesting. It's interesting to watch. It's interesting to hear. And a lot of times, like in the comics, they do things from a different angle. So in other words, you get to see certain scenes, but you see them from a different point of view of either a person or just the visual. You're used to seeing this kind of frame. No, they're going to show it to you in a different frame. Yeah. And it's interesting. It's different rather than having to basically look at a frame by frame of a movie. Remember when they used to put those little paperback size, they were Filmation or Photomation?
Photo
novels. And it was like...
They did it with a lot of movies. They did it with Star Trek episodes,
picture.
And they did it with the motion picture. And Battlestar Galactica.
I mean, that's a way of almost watching the movie without really having any artist interpretation of anything. There's the movie, except you got to go page by page. Something like you flip them and
And somebody has to just write in the script.
This medium, whether it's, like I said, whether it's a novel, comic book adaptation, or a radio drama, it's a different view. Now, next time, not necessarily next week, but next time we are going to do Jedi, and we are going to hopefully tap a little bit, not too much, into the actual newspaper strip, because that's a whole other world.
And that was these guys, and it was a big deal.
A lot of these names repeat themselves.
Yeah, and so in addition to the monthly comics, there was a daily and weekly newspaper strip. And to me, I have a little fondness for it because just the nature of it, comic strips.
Right. Jedi is going to be a lot shorter, so that's why we'll probably be able to include the strip. As you get further along, there's less differences in versions.
So there's more access in the creative process.
And these guys, I said, every movie gives them more information about the following one, so there's less creative embellishments that they have to take. The more you get closer to the newer stuff, the more it looks like the movie to me.
Yeah.
But still, there's a lot of differences that I want to go over. But anyway, I want to thank James, first of all, for joining me today on this part 2, I guess, of our movie adaptation Marvel comic book version of Star Wars. This time around, we hit Empire. And I'd like to thank you guys for listening. And we will see you here next time at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Best things that ever happened is about to happen again. The Empire Strikes Back. Han Solo is back.
Laugh it up.
Fuzzball. Princess Leia is back.
I just assumed it's a Wookiee.
I can arrange that.
Yoda's back. In fact, the whole gang is back. Join me. The Empire Strikes Back for a special limited engagement. Rated PG.
Wait for me!
Now playing at a theater near you.
Oh, all you do is read comic books?
Chewbacca can do it.
That's the special edition.